Millionaire sees beggar girl selling his late daughter's necklace. The truth changed his life forever. Before we dive into this incredible story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. You're about to witness a miracle that will restore your faith in destiny. Enjoy the journey. Harrison Blake adjusted his Italian silk tie as he stepped out of the Manhattan boardroom, another multi-million-dollar deal secured. At 48, the CEO of Blake Industries had mastered the art of turning everything he touched into gold. Success was his language, power his currency. The crisp October air hit his face as he walked down Fifth Avenue, his mind already calculating the next quarter's projections. That's when he saw her. A small figure huddled against the cold brick wall of a luxury boutique no more than 6 years old with golden hair that caught the afternoon sunlight. She held a cardboard sign that read, "Please help," in crayon letters. Harrison had walked past countless homeless individuals over the years, his heart carefully shielded by necessity. But something made him stop, something that made his blood freeze in his veins. Around the little girl's neck hung a sapphire pendant, its blue stone catching the light. Harrison's hand instinctively went to his chest, where an identical chain had once rested, the matching necklace he'd given to his daughter Emily before she lost her battle with leukemia 3 years ago. "Excuse me," Harrison said, his voice barely steady as he knelt beside the child. "That's a beautiful necklace." The girl looked up with emerald eyes that seemed impossibly familiar. "My mama gave it to me before she went to heaven," she said simply. "She told me it was special, that it would keep me safe until I found where I belong." Harrison's heart pounded. Only 2 of these necklaces existed in the entire world, custom pieces he'd commissioned from a jeweler in Switzerland. Emily had been buried wearing hers. "What's your name, sweetheart?" he asked gently. "Grace," she replied, studying his face with an intensity that unnerved him. "Grace Sullivan. But Mama always said my real family would know me when they saw me." As Grace tilted her head, Harrison saw it clearly, the small crescent-shaped birthmark just behind her left ear. The exact same mark Emily had carried, the exact same mark he carried. The impossible was staring him in the face with his dead daughter's eyes. Harrison stared at Grace, his mind racing to process what seemed impossible. The bustling sounds of Fifth Avenue faded into white noise as he knelt before this child who wore his daughter's face and carried her most precious possession. "Grace," he said carefully, "can you tell me about your mama? What was her name?" The little girl's eyes grew sad. "Margaret Sullivan. She wasn't my real mama, but she loved me like one. She got very sick, like the cough that wouldn't go away." Grace touched the necklace gently. "Before she died, she told me stories about a man who gave away matching necklaces to 2 special little girls." Harrison's throat tightened. 2 necklaces. Grace nodded solemnly. "She said one day when I was big enough to understand, she'd tell me about my real family. But then she got too sick to talk." Her small fingers traced the sapphire. "This was all I had when the mean people came to take me away." "What mean people?" Harrison asked, alarm rising in his voice. "The ones from the building with lots of papers. They said I had to go live somewhere else because I didn't have a mama anymore." Grace's voice became smaller. "But I ran away. Mama always said if I was scared I should find somewhere safe and wait." Harrison felt something crack inside his chest. This child, who looked exactly like Emily, who carried Emily's necklace, who had the family birthmark, had been living on the streets. "Grace," he said gently, "would you like to come have dinner with me? Somewhere warm?" She studied his face with those impossibly familiar green eyes. "Mama said I should never go with strangers." "Your mama was very smart," Harrison agreed. "But she also said you'd know your real family when you found them, didn't she?" Grace tilted her head, considering this logic with the seriousness only children possess. Finally, she stood and brushed dirt from her worn coat. "Okay," she said, slipping her tiny hand into his much larger one. "But can we get ice cream too?" For the first time in 3 years, Harrison Blake smiled with genuine joy. As much as you want, sweetheart. As much as you want. As they walked toward his car, Harrison couldn't shake the feeling that Emily had somehow guided this moment. The impossible was becoming reality, and he was holding the proof in his hand. The wrought iron. Gates of the Blake estate opened silently as Harrison's Bentley approached the circular driveway. Grace pressed her nose against the window, her eyes widening as the three-story Georgian mansion came into view, its windows glowing like golden jewels against the twilight sky. "This is where you live?" she whispered, her voice filled with wonder. "Yes," Harrison replied, suddenly seeing his home through different eyes. The manicured gardens, the marble fountain, the imposing columns, it all seemed excessive when viewed beside this small girl clutching a worn stuffed rabbit. Mrs. Catherine Morrison, the family's housekeeper for 20 years, appeared at the front door. Her silver hair was pulled into its usual neat bun, but her expression shifted from professional courtesy to shock as Grace stepped out of the car. "Mr. Blake," she breathed, her Irish accent thickening with emotion. "Dear heavens, she looks exactly like—" "I know," Harrison said quietly. "Catherine, this is Grace. She'll be staying with us for a while." Mrs. Morrison knelt down, her eyes misty. "Hello, darling. You must be hungry." Grace nodded shyly, but her attention was drawn to the foyer chandelier, its crystal teardrops catching the light like captured rainbows. She followed Harrison up the curved staircase, her small hand trailing along the polished banister. "Can I see everything?" she asked with the honest curiosity of childhood. Harrison's throat tightened as he stopped before a door that had remained closed for 3 years, Emily's room. Slowly, he turned the handle. The space was exactly as Emily had left it. Ballet shoes by the window, art supplies scattered on the desk, stuffed animals arranged on the canopy bed. Grace stepped inside reverently, as if entering a sacred space. She stopped before Emily's vanity, where a framed photograph showed a laughing girl with golden hair and green eyes. Grace reached out tentatively, then pulled her hand back. "She looks like me," Grace whispered. "Her name was Emily," Harrison said, his voice thick with emotion. "She was my daughter." Grace turned to face him, her young mind processing the implications. "Was?" "She went to heaven 3 years ago." Grace studied his face with remarkable perception for someone so young. Then, without a word, she crossed the room and slipped her small arms around his waist. "I'm sorry your little girl went to heaven," she said simply. "That must make your heart very sad." Harrison felt tears he'd held back for years finally break free as he held this impossible child who had somehow found her way home. That night, after Grace had fallen asleep in the guest room, Harrison found himself in his study, staring at a locked drawer he hadn't opened in 3 years. His hands trembled as he retrieved the small velvet box hidden beneath old contracts. Inside lay Emily's medical bracelet, a few pressed flowers from her hospital room, and a letter she'd written to him during her final days. But it was the photograph that stopped his breath. Emily at age 6, wearing the identical sapphire necklace, standing in the same spot where Grace had stood just hours earlier. The jeweler swore only 2 existed, he whispered to the empty room. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Grace stood in the doorway, her oversized pajamas making her appear even smaller. "I heard crying," she said quietly. "Are you sad about Emily?" Harrison quickly closed the box, but Grace had already seen the photograph. She approached slowly, her bare feet silent on the Persian rug. "She was pretty," Grace said, studying Emily's picture. "Mama Margaret used to tell me stories about a girl who looked just like me. She said the girl lived in a big house with a daddy who loved her very much." Harrison's heart stopped. "What else did Margaret tell you?" Grace climbed onto the leather chair beside his desk, her legs dangling. "She said the girl got very sick, and her daddy was so sad he forgot how to smile. But someday, the daddy would find another little girl who needed him, and he'd remember how to be happy again." The words hit Harrison like a physical blow. How could Margaret have known these details? "Grace," he said carefully, "do you remember anything from when you were very little? Before Margaret?" She frowned, concentrating. "Sometimes I dream about a room with pink walls and a rocking horse and singing. Someone always singing lullabies." Her eyes brightened. "Do you know Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, but with different words?" Harrison's blood ran cold. "What different words?" In a sweet, clear voice, Grace sang, "Twinkle, twinkle, little star, Daddy loves you where you are, up above the world so high like a diamond in the sky." It was Emily's song, the version he'd created just for her, sung to no one else in the world. "Grace," Harrison whispered, kneeling beside her chair. "I promise you something. I'm going to find out who you really are, and I'm never going to let anyone hurt you again." Grace smiled, the first truly radiant smile he'd seen from her. "I already know who I am, Mr. Harrison. I'm the little girl who came home." 3 weeks had passed since Grace arrived, and a delicate routine had formed at the Blake estate. Harrison found himself leaving the office earlier, delegating meetings he would have once considered essential. For the first time in years, his phone stayed silent during dinner. Grace flourished under the attention and care. Mrs. Morrison had taken to braiding her hair each morning, and Harrison had hired Melissa Parker, a gentle private tutor, to help Grace catch up academically. Her intelligence was remarkable. She absorbed lessons like a sponge, her artistic talents emerging with every drawing and painting. "Look what I made," Grace announced one evening, presenting Harrison with a watercolor of the estate's garden. The technique was surprisingly sophisticated for a 6-year-old, showing an intuitive understanding of light and shadow. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," Harrison said, studying the delicate brushstrokes. "Emily loved to paint too." Grace beamed. "Mrs. Morrison showed me Emily's art room. May I use it sometimes?" Harrison hesitated. Emily's art studio had been another sacred space, untouched since her death. But watching Grace's hopeful expression, he nodded. Emily would have wanted someone to enjoy it. The differences in their worlds became apparent in small moments. Grace checked price tags at the grocery store out of habit, apologized for wanting seconds at dinner, and carefully folded every piece of clothing as if it might disappear. When Harrison bought her new dresses, she hung them reverently in the closet, touching them as if they were made of spun gold. "You don't have to save them for special occasions," Harrison told her gently. "They're for you to wear whenever you want." Grace looked up from the navy velvet dress she was stroking. "Mama Margaret always said we should take care of nice things because we might not get them again." The casual mention of poverty in Grace's past life hit Harrison harder each time. While he'd been building his empire, this child, possibly his child, had been learning to survive with nothing. One evening, as Harrison tucked Grace into bed, she asked the question he'd been dreading. "Mr. Harrison, how long can I stay here?" He smoothed her golden hair. "What do you mean?" "Mama Margaret said good things don't last forever, that people like us have to be grateful for whatever kindness we get." Her green eyes searched his face. "When will you get tired of me?" Harrison felt his heart break and heal simultaneously. "Grace, you're not a guest here. You're family, and family doesn't get tired of each other." But even as he spoke the words, his phone buzzed insistently. His business partner Robert Kane's name flashed on the screen, the 5th call that day. Grace noticed his hesitation. "It's okay if you need to answer. Important people have important things to do." As Harrison silenced the phone, he wondered why Kane seemed so agitated lately, especially whenever Grace was mentioned. The first photograph appeared in the New York Post on a Tuesday morning. Harrison Blake walking hand in hand with a blonde child outside FAO Schwartz. The headline read, "Billionaire's Secret Daughter?" Harrison's assistant, Rebecca Chen, burst into his office with the newspaper. "Sir, we have a situation." By noon, 3 news vans were parked outside the Blake estate. Harrison's phone rang constantly. Reporters, investors, board members all demanding explanations. The company's stock fluctuated wildly as speculation ran rampant. CEO's love child revealed, screamed one tabloid. Another suggested mysterious heir appears from nowhere. Harrison arrived home to find Grace pressed against the living room window, watching the cameras with wide, frightened eyes. "Are those people here because of me?" she asked, her voice small. "They're just curious, sweetheart," Harrison said, kneeling beside her. "Sometimes when you're in the news, people want to know your business." "Did I do something wrong?" The innocence in her question made Harrison's chest ache. "No, Grace, you did nothing wrong. These people don't understand our situation yet." That evening, James Fletcher from Child Protective Services appeared at the door, a thin man with kind eyes and a clipboard full of questions. "Mr. Blake, we've received calls expressing concern about a child living here," Fletcher explained in the study. "I need to understand the nature of your relationship with Grace." Harrison chose his words carefully. "Grace came to me in need. I felt a connection to her situation. I'm providing temporary care while exploring more permanent arrangements. Without going through proper channels? I'm prepared to file adoption papers," Harrison said firmly. Fletcher made notes. "The media attention suggests this is more than charity. Grace bears a remarkable resemblance to your late daughter. Children can look similar without being related," Harrison replied, though his heart hammered. During Fletcher's interview with Grace, Harrison paced the hallway, straining to hear their conversation. When the social worker emerged, his expression was thoughtful. "Grace is clearly thriving here," Fletcher admitted. "But the circumstances are unusual. I'll need to conduct follow-up visits." After Fletcher left, Harrison's business partner Robert Kane called, his voice unusually agitated. "Harrison, this media circus is affecting the company. The board is nervous. Maybe it's time to..." "To what, Robert?" "To consider whether this girl is worth risking everything you've built." Something in Kane's tone sent a chill down Harrison's spine. "She's a 6-year-old child who lost her mother." "Is she, though?" Kane pressed. "How much do you really know about her background?" The question hung in the air long after Kane hung up, leaving Harrison wondering why his partner seemed so desperate to plant seeds of doubt. "My name is Grace Sullivan, and I think I might be dreaming. 3 weeks ago, I was sleeping in doorways and eating from garbage cans. Now I live in a house so big I sometimes get lost trying to find the bathroom. Mr. Harrison, he says I can call him Harrison now, bought me 12 new dresses, but I still keep my old clothes hidden under the bed, just in case. Mama Margaret always said not to get too comfortable when good things happen to poor people like us. Enjoy it while it lasts, sweet pea," she'd whisper when we found a warm place to sleep or someone gave us extra food, "but don't forget who you really are." But here's the confusing part. I don't feel like I'm pretending to belong here. When Harrison reads me bedtime stories, it feels right. When Mrs. Morrison braids my hair and hums Irish songs, something deep inside me remembers being loved like this before. Sometimes I have dreams that feel more like memories. A pink room with a rocking horse. Someone singing lullabies in a voice that sounds like mine. A man with kind eyes, eyes like Harrison's, tucking blankets around me and whispering, "Daddy loves you, little star." But that's impossible, isn't it? Harrison's daughter Emily died. I saw her picture and she looks exactly like me, but she's gone to heaven. I'm just Grace Sullivan, the girl nobody wanted until now. Except, why do I know that Harrison takes his coffee black with 2 sugars? Why did I automatically avoid the 3rd step on the main staircase because it creaks? Why does the song he sang to Emily feel like something carved into my bones? Yesterday, I found Emily's journal hidden behind books in the art room. Her handwriting looks exactly like mine, even though no one taught me to write the letter G with that little curl. At the bottom, when I read her words about missing someone she couldn't remember, about feeling like half of herself was missing, my chest hurt in a way I couldn't explain. The scary men with cameras outside make me want to hide. They remind me of the social workers who chased me after Mama Margaret died. But when Harrison holds my hand and promises they can't hurt me, I believe him. There's only one person who makes me truly afraid. Harrison's friend, Mr. Kane. He visits sometimes, and when he looks at me, his face goes white like he's seen a ghost. He asks strange questions about where I lived before, about Mama Margaret, about what I remember. His hands shake when he talks to me, and his eyes dart around like he's afraid of being caught doing something bad. Last night I heard him arguing with Harrison on the phone about complications and risks that need to be managed. I don't understand what he meant, but something in his voice made me hide behind the door and listen. Maybe I am dreaming. But if I am, I don't ever want to wake up. The Blake Industries boardroom felt like a war zone as Harrison faced 12 expectant faces. At the head of the table, Robert Kane shuffled papers with uncharacteristic nervousness, his usually steady hands trembling slightly. "The Meridian merger can't wait any longer," Kane announced, his voice strained. "Harrison, we need you in Seattle immediately. 3 weeks minimum to oversee the transition personally." Harrison studied his business partner of 15 years. Kane's left eye twitched, a tell Harrison recognized from high-stakes negotiations. Something was wrong. "The timeline seems artificial, Robert. We could handle this remotely." "Absolutely not," Kane interrupted too quickly. "The investors are already skittish about your personal distractions. They need to see you're fully committed." Board member Patricia Wells leaned forward. "Harrison, this merger represents the largest expansion in company history. Your presence is non-negotiable. My daughter needs stability right now," Harrison said firmly. Kane's face went ashen at the word daughter. "She's not your daughter, Harrison. She's a stray you picked up off the street. This sentimentality is compromising your judgment." Room fell silent at Kane's harsh words. Harrison felt white-hot anger surge through him. "That child has been through enough trauma. I won't abandon her for a business deal." "And if the deal falls through?" Kane pressed, sweat beading on his forehead. "If we lose the merger because you're playing house with some random kid, what happens to the 1,000 employees counting on this company's success?" Harrison noticed how Kane avoided using Grace's name, how his voice pitched higher whenever she was mentioned. Why was his partner so invested in separating them? "I'll review the contracts tonight," Harrison said finally. "We'll discuss alternatives tomorrow." Kane's jaw clenched. "There are no alternatives. You leave for Seattle Monday, or we lose everything." That evening, Harrison found Grace in Emily's art room painting quietly. She'd created a family portrait, Harrison herself, and a golden-haired figure floating above them with angel wings. "That's Emily watching over us," Grace explained, adding delicate details to the angel's face. Harrison's throat tightened. "Grace, I need to talk to you about something important." She set down her brush, her green eyes immediately wary. "There's a business situation that might require me to travel," he began carefully. Grace's face crumpled. "How long?" 3 weeks, maybe less." "Oh." Her voice became very small. She turned back to her painting, adding darker colors to the sky. "When do you leave?" "I haven't decided if I'm going yet." Grace looked up, hope flickering in her eyes. "Really?" Before Harrison could answer, his phone buzzed. Kane's name flashed urgently. "Don't answer it," Grace whispered. "Please, every time that man calls, you get sad." Harrison stared at his phone, then at Grace's frightened face. In that moment, he realized his partner's behavior wasn't about business at all. Robert Kane was afraid of Grace. The question was, why? Harrison's decision to stay came at a cost he hadn't anticipated. By Thursday morning, 3 board members had called emergency meetings. The Seattle investors were threatening to withdraw, and Blake Industries' stock had dropped 12%. But it was the knock on his door at 8 a.m. that changed everything. "Mr. Blake?" The woman standing on his doorstep wore a crisp suit and carried official documents. "I'm Sandra Morrison from Child Protective Services. We've received a formal complaint regarding Grace Sullivan's living situation." Harrison's blood ran cold. "What kind of complaint?" Allegations that you're emotionally unstable, that your recent business decisions demonstrate impaired judgment, and that you're using this child to fill a psychological void left by your deceased daughter. The specificity of the accusations hit Harrison like a physical blow. Only someone with intimate knowledge of his personal and professional life could have crafted such a detailed complaint. "Who filed this?" he asked, though he already suspected. The answer: "I'm not at liberty to say, but the complainant provided extensive documentation of your recent erratic behavior." As Sandra interviewed Grace, Harrison paced his study, fury building with each passing minute. When she emerged, her expression was troubled. "Grace is clearly attached to you, and she appears well cared for," Sandra admitted. "However, the circumstances of her placement here remain highly irregular. I'm required to recommend a temporary foster placement while we investigate the allegations." "Absolutely not. Mr. Blake, this isn't a request. Grace will be placed in protective custody until—" "Wait." Harrison's voice was deadly calm. "I want to know exactly what documentation was provided. I have a right to see the complaint." Sandra hesitated, then produced a thick folder. As Harrison scanned the contents, his suspicions crystallized into certainty. Bank records, private meeting notes, psychological evaluations, information only someone with insider access could obtain. Robert Kane had orchestrated everything. "I need 24 hours to respond to these allegations," Harrison said. "I'm afraid that's not possible." "Then you'll be hearing from my attorney within the hour," Harrison interrupted. "And I guarantee you the media will be very interested in how Child Services handles the forced separation of a trauma victim from her caregiver, based on anonymous accusations." After Sandra left, Harrison immediately called Samuel Torres, the best private investigator in New York. "Sam, I need everything you can find on a child named Grace Sullivan. Birth records, adoption papers, medical history, everything. How deep do you want me to dig?" "All the way to the bottom. Someone's trying to take her away from me, and I think they're connected to her past." That evening, Robert Kane arrived, unannounced, his face flushed with apparent concern. "Harrison, I heard about the CPS visit. This has gone too far. You need to let the authorities handle this girl's placement properly." Harrison studied his partner's face, noting the beads of sweat despite the cool evening. "Funny thing, Robert. The complaint mentioned private details about my psychological state that only someone very close to me would know." Kane's left eye twitched violently. "Are you suggesting—" "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm stating it directly. You filed that complaint." "That's ridiculous," Kane stammered. "Why would I—" "That's exactly what I intend to find out." Kane's facade cracked slightly. "Harrison, you're not thinking clearly. This obsession with some random street kid is destroying everything we've built." "Random?" Harrison stepped closer. "You keep saying that, Robert, but you've never once asked about her background. Never shown curiosity about how she ended up on the streets. Almost like you already know her story." Kane's face went white. "I don't know what you're implying." "Then you won't mind if my investigator looks into Grace's past. All of it." For a moment, raw panic flashed across Kane's features before he managed to compose himself. "Do whatever you need to do," Kane said, but his voice shook. "Just remember, Harrison, some stones are better left unturned." After Kane left, Harrison found Grace hiding behind the staircase, tears streaming down her face. "I heard everything," she whispered. "He wants to take me away." Harrison knelt and pulled her into his arms. "I promise you, Grace, no one is taking you anywhere. We're going to find out the truth about who you are and why he's so afraid of you." As he held his frightened daughter, because that's what she was, he knew it now, Harrison realized he was about to uncover a betrayal that would shatter everything he thought he knew about his closest friend. Samuel Torres's call came at 6 a.m., his voice grim with discovery. "Harrison, you need to sit down for this. Grace Sullivan's birth certificate is a forgery. The woman listed as her mother, Margaret Sullivan, has no medical records of giving birth. No prenatal care, no hospital admission, nothing. Harrison's coffee mug shattered against the kitchen floor. What are you saying? I'm saying Grace was never Margaret's biological child. Margaret adopted her through illegal channels when Grace was approximately 6 months old. Harrison's mind raced. Can you trace where she came from? That's where it gets interesting. Grace was born at St. Mary's Hospital, the same hospital where your daughter Emily was born on the exact same date. The room spun around Harrison. That's impossible. There's more. I found irregularities in St. Mary's records from that day. Someone with administrative access deleted and altered files. The original birth logs show 2 entries for the Blake family, but the official records only show 1. Harrison gripped the phone with white knuckles. Are you telling me? I'm telling you Grace might be Emily's twin sister. Before Harrison could process this bombshell, screaming erupted from upstairs. He bounded up the steps 3 at a time to find Grace thrashing in her bed, tears streaming down her face. No, no, don't take me, she sobbed. I want to stay with my sister. Grace, wake up, Harrison said gently, sitting on her bed. You're safe. Her eyes flew open, disoriented and terrified. The man with the ugly smile was there again. He separated us. He said 1 baby was enough for the rich family. Harrison's blood turned to ice. Grace, what man? What did he look like? Tall, with dark hair. He had a scar on his hand shaped like a moon. Grace traced a crescent in the air. He smelled like the cigarettes that hurt your nose. Harrison knew that scar. Kane had gotten it in a childhood accident, a detail he'd shared during their early partnership days. Grace, this is very important. In your dream, did you see where the man took you? She nodded, still shaking. To a lady with sad eyes who gave me to Mama Margaret. She said the man paid her lots of money to find me a good home far away. Rage consumed Harrison as the pieces clicked into place. Kane had stolen his daughter. Kane had watched him grieve for 3 years knowing Grace was alive. Kane had profited from the sale of his own child. His phone buzzed. Kane's name appeared on the screen. We need to talk. Kane's voice was strained when Harrison answered. Meet me at the office, alone. Planning to finish what you started? Harrison's voice was deadly quiet. A pause. What are you talking about? I know what you did, Robert. I know about Grace. I know about the twins. The line went silent for a long moment. Then Kane's voice returned, all pretense gone. You don't know everything, Harrison. If you did, you'd understand why it had to be this way. Enlighten me. Not over the phone. 1 hour, my office. Come alone, or I disappear, and you'll never get the whole truth. The line went dead. Harrison looked at Grace, who was watching him with Emily's intelligent eyes. Grace, I need you to stay with Mrs. Morrison while I go handle something very important. You're going to see the bad man, aren't you? Harrison knelt beside her. Bed. Yes, but when I come back, we're going to make sure he can never hurt anyone again. Grace grabbed his hand. Be careful, Daddy. The word hit Harrison like lightning. She'd never called him that before. What did you say? Grace smiled through her tears. I remember now. You used to sing to both of us, Emily and me. We were the 2 little stars, and you loved us both. As Harrison drove toward what he knew would be the confrontation of his life, one thought burned in his mind. Kane had stolen 6 years of his daughter's life. Now he was going to pay for every single day. The Blake Industries building felt foreign as Harrison entered the executive floor. 20 years of his life had been spent building this empire, but now it seemed hollow compared to the little girl waiting for him at home. Kane stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, his usually immaculate appearance disheveled. Empty whiskey bottles littered his desk, and his hands shook as he poured another drink. You came, Kane said without turning around. Did you really think I wouldn't? Harrison closed the door behind him. Tell me everything, Robert, from the beginning. Kane laughed bitterly. The beginning? The beginning was 15 years ago when you trusted the wrong person. He finally faced Harrison, his eyes bloodshot. I was broke, Harrison, gambling debts, loan sharks threatening my family. I needed money fast. So you sold my daughter. I sold one of your daughters, Kane corrected. You still had Emily, you still had everything. Harrison fought to control his rage. How? Kane slumped into his chair. I had connections at St. Mary's, a nurse named Patricia who owed me favors. When your wife went into labor, the ultrasound showed twins, but we altered the records. Only Emily's birth was officially documented. And Grace? Patricia took her directly from the delivery room before anyone could see. Your wife was unconscious from complications. The medical team was focused on Emily's breathing issues. No one noticed the second baby was missing. Harrison's hands clenched into fists. My wife died believing she'd only given birth to one child. The buyer was waiting, a wealthy woman who couldn't have children naturally. She paid $2 million for a healthy newborn, no questions asked. When she died 2 years later, Grace went to Margaret Sullivan through another intermediary. While I grieved for my wife and worried about Emily's health, you were counting blood, money. Kane's composure cracked completely. I never meant for it to go this far. When Emily got sick, when she died, I thought the secret died with her. Then Grace appeared, wearing that damned necklace, looking exactly like Emily. I panicked. So you tried to have her taken away. I was protecting us both. Kane stood abruptly. Do you know what happens to me when this comes out? Prison, Harrison. My family destroyed, my reputation in ruins. And for what? Some kid who's been fine without you for 6 years? Harrison stepped forward, his voice deadly calm. That kid is my daughter. She's been homeless, traumatized, and alone because of your greed. She's alive. That's more than Emily got. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Harrison grabbed Kane by the collar, slamming him against the window. Emily died because of a genetic condition that runs in families, Harrison hissed. A condition Grace might have inherited. 6 years of medical care she missed because of you. 6 years of love, education, stability, stolen. Kane's phone buzzed on his desk. Both men looked at the screen. CPS custody hearing scheduled tomorrow. You expedited the hearing, Harrison realized. Kane nodded miserably. I thought if I could get her placed in the system quickly, you'd eventually move on. The investigation would hit dead ends. Life would return to normal. Harrison released his grip, stepping back with disgust. Normal? You think there's any coming back from this? He pulled out his phone and dialed 911. What are you doing? Kane asked frantically. What I should have done the moment Grace walked into my life, Harrison replied. I'm choosing her. Over this company, over our partnership, over everything. As the police dispatcher answered, Harrison spoke clearly. I need to report a kidnapping case from 6 years ago. I have the perpetrator and evidence. Kane lunged for the phone, but Harrison blocked him easily. Harrison, please. Think about what you're throwing away. The company, your reputation, the merger. I'm not throwing anything away, Harrison said firmly. I'm finally understanding what really matters. Within minutes, sirens echoed outside. Kane collapsed into his chair, defeated. She won't remember you as her father, Kane said desperately. 6 years is too long. You'll be a stranger trying to play daddy to someone else's child. Then I'll spend the rest of my life earning the right to be her father, Harrison replied, something you'll never understand. As police officers entered the office, Harrison looked out at the city skyline one last time. Tomorrow would bring custody hearings, media storms, and the collapse of everything he'd built professionally. But tonight he was going home to his daughter. The courtroom was packed with reporters, cameras, and spectators as Judge Patricia Williams called the custody hearing to order. Harrison sat at the plaintiff's table, his hand squeezing Grace's small fingers. Across the aisle, the state's representative argued for temporary foster placement pending a full investigation. Kane was absent, arrested the previous evening on charges of kidnapping, child trafficking, and fraud. But his lawyer was present, desperately trying to distance their client from the custody proceedings. Your Honor, the prosecutor began, We're dealing with an unprecedented case. DNA evidence confirms that Grace Sullivan is indeed Harrison Blake's biological daughter, twin sister to his deceased daughter, Emily. She was illegally separated from her family at birth through a conspiracy orchestrated by Robert Kane. Judge Williams studied the medical records spread before her. Mr. Torres, please present your findings to the court. Samuel Torres stood, holding a thick folder. Your Honor, hospital records show clear evidence of tampering. Original birth logs documented twin births to Sarah Blake on March 15, 2018. These records were subsequently altered by someone with administrative access. We've traced this to Patricia Henderson, a nurse who has confessed to accepting bribes from Robert Kane. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Harrison felt Grace squeeze his hand tighter. Furthermore, Torres continued, we've located the original buyer, Mrs. Eleanor Rothschild, who paid $2 million for what she believed was a legal private adoption. When Mrs. Rothschild died, Grace was transferred to Margaret Sullivan through another illegal intermediary. Dr. Sarah Chen, a forensic psychiatrist, testified next. I've conducted extensive interviews with Grace. Her recovered memories, while fragmented due to her young age at separation, contain details only someone present during the birth could know. She accurately described the hospital room layout, medical equipment present, and specific voices, including her father's. The defense attorney stood. Your Honor, even if these allegations are true, the child has been separated from Mr. Blake for 6 years. She's adapted to different environments. Uprooting her again could cause additional trauma. Judge Williams turned to Grace. Sweetheart, I'd like to ask you some questions. Is that okay? Grace nodded solemnly, her green eyes steady. How do you feel about living with Mr. Blake? Safe. Grace answered clearly. For the first time since Mama Margaret died, I feel safe. And I remember things now. Songs he used to sing. The way his voice sounds when he reads stories. I remember loving him before I knew his name. Are you afraid of anyone? Grace's voice dropped to a whisper. Mr. Kane. In my dreams, he's always the man who takes me away from where I belong. Harrison's attorney, Margaret Stone, presented the final evidence. Your Honor, Mr. Blake has undergone voluntary psychological evaluation, demonstrating complete emotional stability and genuine commitment to Grace's welfare. He's restructured his entire business life to prioritize fatherhood. Character witnesses include teachers, medical professionals, and staff who can attest to Grace's remarkable progress in his care. Mrs. Morrison took the stand, her Irish accent thick with emotion. In 20 years working for the Blake family, I've never seen Mr. Blake happier or more at peace than he's been these past weeks with Grace. She's not replacing Emily. She's completing a family that was torn apart by criminal acts. Dr. Rachel Martinez, Grace's pediatrician, testified about Grace's physical condition when she arrived versus her current health. This child was malnourished, showing signs of chronic stress, and had received inadequate medical care. Under Mr. Blake's guardianship, she's thrived physically and emotionally. Kane's lawyer made a desperate final argument. Mr. Blake's client has suffered significant financial losses due to these revelations. His business empire is collapsing. How can he provide stability when his own life is in chaos? Harrison stood, without being asked. Your Honor, may I respond? Judge Williams nodded. 6 weeks ago, I would have considered my company's value my greatest achievement. Today, I realize that Grace is worth more than every asset I've ever accumulated. If I lost everything tomorrow but kept my daughter, I'd consider myself the richest man alive. He looked at Grace, whose eyes shimmered with tears. She calls me Daddy now. Not because she has to, but because she remembers. That's worth more than any empire. The courtroom fell silent as Judge Williams reviewed her notes. After what felt like an eternity, she looked up. Given the extraordinary circumstances of this case, the clear evidence of criminal conspiracy, and the obvious bond between father and daughter, this court grants permanent custody to Harrison Blake. Furthermore, I'm ordering a full investigation into the illegal adoption ring that separated this family. The gavel fell with finality. Grace launched herself into Harrison's arms as reporters exploded into action around them. "Daddy," she whispered against his ear, "are we really going home forever?" "Forever and always, sweetheart. Forever and always." 6 months after the custody hearing, the headlines had shifted from scandal to redemption. Blake Industries CEO chooses family over fortune, read Business Weekly. The miracle reunion that changed corporate America, proclaimed Time magazine. Robert Kane was serving a 20-year sentence for kidnapping, child trafficking, and fraud. The illegal adoption ring he'd participated in had been dismantled, reuniting 12 other families with stolen children. Patricia Henderson, the corrupt nurse, had cooperated fully with authorities in exchange for a reduced sentence. Harrison stood in his redesigned office, watching Grace through the glass partition as she colored at a small desk he'd installed specifically for her afternoon visits. Blake Industries had survived the crisis, though transformed. Harrison had stepped back from daily operations, appointing Rebecca Chen as CEO, while he remained chairman, a role that allowed him to prioritize fatherhood while maintaining strategic oversight. "Daddy, look." Grace ran into his office holding up her latest artwork, a family portrait showing her, Harrison, and Emily as an angel watching over them both. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," Harrison said, hanging it next to the others that now covered one wall of his office. "What gave you this idea?" "I dreamed about Emily again. She told me she's happy I found you. She said now you have both your little stars together, one in heaven, one here with you." Harrison knelt to Grace's level, still amazed by her resilience and wisdom. Dr. Martinez had warned that recovering suppressed memories might cause trauma, but Grace seemed to process her past with remarkable strength. "Do you miss her?" Grace asked, studying Emily's photo on Harrison's desk. "Every day," Harrison admitted, "but having you here helps the sadness feel different. Instead of missing what I lost, I'm grateful for what I found." Grace nodded solemnly. "Mama Margaret used to say sad and happy can live in the same heart if you let them." Mrs. Morrison appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Blake, the lawyer, is here for the final paperwork." Margaret Stone entered with documents that would officially change Grace Sullivan to Grace Blake. "Just a few signatures and it's official," she said warmly. As Harrison signed each page, Grace watched intently. "What does this mean exactly?" "It means you're legally my daughter forever," Harrison explained. "Your name will be Grace Blake and no one can ever separate us again." Grace picked up a pen with serious concentration, carefully writing her new name in the child's signature section. "Grace Blake," she said proudly. "I like how it sounds." That evening, they visited Emily's grave for the first time together. Grace placed a drawing of twin angels by the headstone while Harrison added fresh flowers. "Hi, Emily," Grace whispered to the marble angel. "I'm Grace, your sister. Daddy told me all about you, how brave you were, how much you loved painting, and how you always shared your toys. I brought you something." She pulled out a small jewelry box. Inside was her sapphire necklace. "Daddy gave us matching necklaces, but I want you to have mine too. That way, you'll always know we're both here with you, me taking care of Daddy, and you watching over both of us." Harrison felt tears stream down his face as Grace gently placed the necklace at the base of Emily's headstone. "The lawyers say the money Kane stole will be returned to us," Harrison told Grace as they walked back to the car. "When you're older, you'll inherit everything. But more importantly, you'll never have to worry about being taken care of again." Grace slipped her hand into his. "I don't need money, Daddy, I just need you." "You'll always have me," Harrison promised. "But someday you might want to use that inheritance to help other children like you. Kids who got separated from their families." Grace's eyes lit up. "Could we start helping them now, even while I'm still little?" Harrison smiled, recognizing Emily's generous spirit in Grace's suggestion. "Absolutely. We'll start the Grace and Emily Blake Foundation, How does that sound? Perfect, Grace said. Emily would like that. As they drove home through the city lights, Harrison realized that losing Kane's partnership had been a blessing in disguise. Without the weight of betrayal and hidden guilt, Blake Industries was more profitable than ever. But more importantly, he'd gained something infinitely more valuable: the chance to be the father he'd always meant to be. 2 years had passed since the custody hearing, and the Blake household hummed with the rhythm of genuine family life. Grace, now 8 years old, bounded down the grand staircase each morning with an energy that filled every corner of the mansion with laughter. "Daddy, Mrs. Morrison made pancakes shaped like butterflies," Grace announced, bursting into Harrison's study where he reviewed foundation documents instead of corporate acquisitions. The Grace and Emily Blake Foundation had grown beyond their wildest expectations. They'd reunited 43 families with stolen children, funded legal aid for trafficking victims, and established safe houses in 12 cities. Grace insisted on being involved in age-appropriate ways, creating welcome cards for rescued children and helping select toys for care packages. "Save room for lunch," Harrison said, ruffling her golden hair. "We're meeting the Martinez family today, remember?" Grace's face lit up. "The little boy we helped find his real parents?" "Miguel, yes. He specifically asked to meet the girl who sent him the art supplies that helped him process his trauma." Harrison marveled at how naturally Grace embraced her role as a survivor helping other survivors. Dr. Martinez had explained that helping others heal often accelerated a child's own recovery, and Grace proved this theory beautifully. Their home had been transformed to accommodate family life. Emily's art studio was now shared space where Grace painted daily, her work displaying a sophistication that reminded Harrison of both Emily and her mother Sarah's artistic talents. The formal dining room hosted weekly dinners for foundation staff, creating the warm, welcoming atmosphere Sarah had always wanted, but never lived to see. Rebecca called about the board meeting. Mrs. Morrison informed Harrison as she served breakfast. "She says the quarterly reports show record profits." Harrison nodded absently, focused on Grace's excited chatter about her latest painting project. Stepping back from daily operations had paradoxically made Blake Industries more successful. Rebecca's fresh leadership, combined with Harrison's strategic vision and newfound work-life balance, had created a more innovative, compassionate corporate culture. "Daddy, look!" Grace presented a watercolor of the mansion's garden, but with two figures, a girl with golden hair playing while an ethereal figure with wings watched from above. "Emily's in all my paintings now," Grace explained matter-of-factly. "Not because I'm sad, but because she's part of our family. Dr. Martinez says that's healthy." Harrison studied the painting, struck by Grace's emotional maturity. Therapy had helped her process the trauma of separation and loss, but more importantly, it had helped her understand that loving her found family didn't diminish the love she'd felt for Margaret Sullivan. "We should frame this for the foundation office," Harrison suggested. "It shows other children that families can be complicated but still perfect." That afternoon, as they drove to meet the Martinez family, Grace grew thoughtful. "Daddy, do you think Kane ever feels sorry for what he did?" Harrison considered his answer carefully. They'd maintained honest communication about Kane's actions, helping Grace understand the situation without fostering hatred. "I think he's had time to realize he destroyed many lives for money," Harrison replied. "Whether he truly feels sorry, I don't know. But what matters is that good came from something terrible. We found each other and now we're helping other families heal." "I forgive him," Grace said quietly. "Not because what he did was okay, but because being angry hurts me more than it hurts him. Dr. Martinez taught me that." Harrison felt his chest tighten with pride. His 8-year-old daughter possessed wisdom that many adults never achieved. The reunion with the Martinez family was powerful. Miguel, 10 years old, had been trafficked as a toddler and recently reunited with his biological parents through the foundation's work. When he met Grace, he shyly presented her with a drawing of his own, 2 children holding hands with the words "We made it," written in careful block letters. "You helped save my family," Miguel's mother told Grace in accented English, tears streaming down her face. "How do we thank you?" "By being happy," Grace replied simply. "That's what makes all the hard work worth it." Driving home, Harrison reflected on how completely his priorities had shifted. Board meetings that once consumed his thoughts now felt insignificant compared to Grace's piano recitals. Merger negotiations paled beside bedtime stories. The empire he'd built seemed hollow compared to the home they'd created. "Daddy," Grace said as they pulled into their driveway, "do you ever miss the way things were before? When work was the most important thing?" Harrison parked and turned to face his daughter, this miraculous child who'd taught him what success actually meant. "Grace, I spent 46 years climbing a mountain I thought led to happiness. Then you walked into my life and showed me I'd been climbing the wrong mountain entirely." Grace smiled, the radiant expression that had become Harrison's favorite sight in the world. "I love you too, Daddy." As they walked into their home together, Harrison knew with absolute certainty that every loss, every betrayal, every moment of grief had led to this perfect, impossible second chance at the life he was always meant to live. 10 years had passed since that life-changing moment on Fifth Avenue, when Harrison first saw Grace wearing Emily's necklace. Now 18 years old, Grace Blake stood at the podium of the annual Grace and Emily Blake Foundation Gala, addressing an audience of donors, survivors, and families whose lives had been forever changed by their work. Harrison watched from the front row, his heart swelling with pride as his daughter spoke with the poise and passion of someone who had transformed personal trauma into purpose. 10 years ago, I was a 6-year-old girl sleeping in doorways, carrying a necklace I didn't understand. Was a map leading me home? Grace began, her voice strong and clear. Tonight I stand before you as living proof that love can triumph over the cruelest circumstances, that families can heal from the deepest wounds, and that sometimes our greatest losses lead us to our most precious discoveries. The ballroom was silent, captivated by Grace's presence. She had grown into a remarkable young woman. Emily's artistic talent combined with Sarah's grace and Harrison's determination. Her golden hair was styled elegantly, and she wore both sapphire necklaces, hers and Emily's, as she always did, at important events. This foundation has reunited 847 families over the past decade, Grace continued. Each number represents a child who came home, parents who never stopped hoping, and siblings who found each other against impossible odds. But tonight, I want to talk about something more personal. What it means to choose love over profit, family over fortune, and hope over despair. Harrison felt tears gathering as Grace's eyes found his in the audience. My father, Harrison Blake, was one of the most successful businessmen in America when fate brought us together. He could have sent me to the authorities and returned to his comfortable, predictable life. Instead, he chose to risk everything, his reputation, his company, his carefully constructed world, for a frightened little girl who reminded him of the daughter he'd lost. The audience murmured appreciatively, but Grace wasn't finished. Some people ask if I ever wonder what my life would have been like if Mr. Kane hadn't stolen me from my family. The answer is yes. I would have grown up with Emily, my twin sister, and we would have been raised together by parents who loved us both. But I've learned that wondering about different paths only steals joy from the path you're actually walking. Grace paused, her hand touching both necklaces. Emily died when she was 9, but she's been with us every step of this journey. Her spirit guided me home through that necklace. Her memory inspired this foundation. Her love lives on in every child we save. Death separated us physically, but love reunited us spiritually. Harrison thought about the past decade, the challenges they'd faced, the joy they'd shared, the family they'd built together. Grace had excelled academically, earning early admission to Harvard, where she planned to study law and social work. But more importantly, she'd grown into a young woman of extraordinary compassion and strength. Tonight marks my official transition to president of this foundation, Grace announced. My father has taught me that true leadership means knowing when to step forward and when to step back. He stepped back from running his empire to raise me. Now it's my turn to step forward and continue the work of healing families. The audience erupted in applause as Harrison joined Grace on stage. She had insisted he be part of this moment, this passing of the torch from father to daughter. "Dad," Grace said, her voice breaking slightly with emotion, "thank you for choosing me. Thank you for showing me that love multiplies when we share it, that strength comes from vulnerability, and that the greatest success isn't measured in dollars but in the lives we touch." Harrison embraced his daughter, remembering the frightened 6-year-old who had once asked if good things could last forever. "Grace," he said into the microphone, his voice thick with emotion, 18 years ago, God blessed me with Emily. 12 years ago, he gave me you. 6 years ago, he took Emily home but left me with you to continue her love story. You've both taught me that a father's greatest achievement isn't the empire he builds, but the legacy he leaves in his children's hearts. As the gala continued around them, father and daughter stood together, two souls who had found each other against impossible odds. The businessman who had once measured success in quarterly profits now understood that his greatest return on Bayomwam investment was the love shining in his daughter's eyes. Later that evening, as they drove home together through the city where their story began, Grace spoke softly. "Dad, do you ever miss the old life? The power, the empire, the feeling of controlling everything?" Harrison smiled, thinking of his current life. Breakfast conversations about Grace's plans to expand the foundation internationally, quiet evenings reading together, the simple joy of being needed not for his wealth but for his love. "Grace, I spent 30 years building a monument to my own ambition, but monuments are cold stone that crumble with time. What we've built together, this family, this love, this legacy of healing, that's eternal." As they pulled into their driveway, Grace noticed a shooting star streaking across the night sky. "Make a wish, Dad." Harrison looked at his daughter, this brilliant, compassionate young woman who had taught him the difference between success and significance, and realized he had everything he could ever wish for. "I don't need to wish, sweetheart. I'm already living my miracle." Grace squeezed his hand, and in that moment, Harrison Blake understood the profound truth that had taken him a lifetime to learn. Some treasures can only be found when you're willing to lose everything else. Love doesn't diminish when shared, it multiplies. And sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as the deepest losses. His empire had been built on calculated risks and strategic acquisitions. But his greatest fortune had been earned through one simple choice: choosing love over fear, family over fortune, and faith over logic. The little girl who had once asked if good things could last forever had become living proof that they could. Grace Blake was his greatest achievement, his most precious treasure, and his most beautiful reminder that miracles happen when you're brave enough to believe in them. Together, they walked into their home, a father and daughter whose love had triumphed over betrayal, loss, and time itself. The necklaces that had once separated them now bound them together, symbols of a family that had been broken by greed but healed by grace. And in the quiet of their shared happiness, Emily's spirit smiled down on them both, knowing that love never truly dies. It simply finds new ways to bloom.